With no further ado, welcome Charles Blow. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you, Princess. I appreciate that very much, and thank you, all of you, for inviting me here to talk to you. I've heard about some of the speakers you've had this morning, and I realize the bar is pretty high. So I actually have to perform well here. And hello to everyone who's watching during the live stream. I think you guys have the live stream. Wherever you are, hello, how are you doing? Well, I don't like to give speeches as much as I like to tell stories. So I'm going to start by telling you a story of two little boys. They are both from, I'm not projecting enough? Okay, here we go. Are we better? Okay, there we go. So two little boys, right? So they're both from struggling families. These are families that hover just above the poverty line. Sometimes they dip into poverty. These are families that have begun to fracture, split apart. These are families in which there is constant stress. The first little boy goes to school in which he feels lost and alone. He has to travel a long distance to get to school. By the time he gets there, he's exhausted. There's the stress and strain of childhood trauma and the breakup of his family has amplified his sense of isolation. He slowly starts to drift away, and his performance in school reflects as much. Now, at this particular school, in every grade, there is, three-tiered system. There is an advanced class, there is regular class, and then there is what all the kids call the slow class, but which is in fact the remedial class. This little boy is taken from the regular class without any explanation as to why this is happening and put into the remedial class. No one tries to reach him, no one tries to help him. They give up on him. Now the second little boy has many of the same issues as I just laid out. But beginning on his first day, I think in fourth grade, new school, and from then on, he gets nothing but straight A's. He performs at the top of his class. He excels as a kind of student leader. He's president of his class, president of several clubs. He becomes a excellent student athlete. By the time he makes it to high school, still performing at the top of his class, the district sends someone to test IQs to see if they have any gifted and talented kids in the school. The second little boy tests high enough on the test that he is considered to be gifted and talented. Only two kids in that school, another boy in an older grade. The district decides that it is important that they get proper education for their skill level, so they send a separate teacher once a week just to teach the two kids. The second little boy wins his way to the International Science Fair. He graduates valedictorian of his class and goes on to college with a scholarship. Now here's the kicker. Those are the same kids. And both of them are me. Right? And what is the difference for me? Going from being placed in a remedial class in one school to being considered to be gifted in another school. The difference was the schools themselves, and the teachers in those schools. Let me tell you the first person that breaks this cycle it is the first day of that 4th grade class. Her name is Mrs. Thomas. Now, Mrs. Thomas is this little firecracker of a woman, probably like this big. She has these big glasses that are set wider than her face. They're just complete circles, like something out of a cartoon. And she has this thin little slit of a mouth that she keeps well lined with red lipstick every single day. And the first day of class, I'm sitting in the back, which is where, I don't know why this happens. That's where all the new kids sit. So you're sitting in the back of the class, and I'm just kind of slumped and disappearing and don't want to be seen. And she gives us a math test. And I don't know if it was nerves or whatever it was, but I jot down the answers to the test, and I realize I'm first to finish. And I walk up to hand in the test. And she looks at me with this incredible, broad, approving smile. And she says, "Whoa, Blow, we're gonna call you Speedy Gonzales." Now, today we all know that was really racist cartoon, right? Like all the other Mexican mice were like really slow and lethargic, and they drank. And there's one mouse, Speedy Gonzales, who was really fast, never drank on television, and he went out, did the work, and got the cheese for the rest of the mice. So we now know this is horrible, but back then that's what we watched, racist cartoons. So she says, "We're gonna call you Speedy Gonzales," and she reaches over and she grabs me, she hugs me, she pulls me close. And she steadies the paper with one hand, and she begins to grade the paper with the other. And I got most of them right, not all, but most of them right. But it was such a transformational moment for me because I had never had a teacher who even looked at me like they cared what kind of grade I got. No one had ever smiled. No one had certainly ever touched me that I could recall. I thought that I was invisible, and that this teacher was the first person who took the time and the energy to see me because I had performed. And in my 4th grade mind, I said, if this is what it takes for people to see me, I will forever be seen. I will always be the first to turn in the test, and I will always get most of them, not all of them, right. And that's what I did from that moment forward. And it was just a transformational moment. And I tell you that because I want to underscore the power that educators have to really touch kids, particularly kids like me, the vulnerable ones, the ones on the edges, from the stressful homes, from the poverty. But you have that opportunity every day in your classrooms to make sure that those children know that you care. And there were other differences between these two schools. One was that the first school was much larger than the second school. There were more students, there were more classes, people were shuffling around. And the second school was a much smaller school, although everybody, pretty much, in the second school was poor. But the class sizes were so small that the teachers got to know each and every student. And there was no advanced and slow classes. Everybody was in the same class, learning at the same rate, and the teachers had a chance to go and deal with each student on their level, but no student had to carry the stigma and shame of being shunted aside. The other thing about the second school was that the teachers seemed to be more experienced and more seasoned. They were all older. They had learned from their own experiences how to deal with children who were under stress. They had learned from their, in the teacher's lounge. I don't know what you guys do in that teacher's lounge. I always imagine that it's something, it's like chandelier and there's champagne and I don't know. But they had gone into this teacher's lounge and they had learned from other teachers about how to reach it, and they kind of got together and they would powwow about this person's struggling. How do we reach him? You had him last year. You may have him next year. And they would deal with it because they had the experience to be able to deal with it. And, you know, perhaps most importantly was the first thing that I mentioned, which is that they just seemed to show a genuine interest in us as kids and in us being successful. It was almost as if our success was their success. And this was before they were being, you know, evaluated on such a thing. It was genuine that they wanted us to succeed because it reflected well on them having succeeded in the classroom. And these somewhat kind of intangible, untestable traits, caring and nurturing, are crucial to students later in life feeling happy and fulfilled as citizens and as human beings. A report in May by Gallup and Purdue University asked college graduates several questions about their college tenures, including the following 6. I had at least one professor who made me feel excited about learning. My professor cared about me as a person. I had a mentor who encouraged me to pursue my goals and dreams. I worked on a project that took a semester or more to complete. I had an internship or a job that allowed me to apply what I was learning in the classroom. I was extremely active in extracurricular activities and organizations while attending college. Students who strongly agreed with these statements were as much as twice as likely to have a strong sense of well-being and engagement at work after college. Now, some of these are specific to college life, but I believe that some of them are universal educational traits. Students need to feel connected, both to their teachers and their work. They need to feel that someone believes in them. But the sad part about that survey was that only 3% of respondents said that they had all 6 of those things. Now let's get back to the experience of the teachers in the room. Another thing that I learned about that experience, I learned from my mother. I was going to write this column about teaching, and I wanted to interview my mom, who is a teacher. And I asked her, why did you become a teacher? Now, I'm expecting her to say, I became a teacher because I love kids, which she does, but that's not what she said. I'm expecting her to say, I became a teacher because I really love teaching and I'm really gifted at it, or something along those lines, which she is. That is not what she said. What she said was that when she was a little girl, girls had 3 options. You could be a secretary, you could be a domestic, you could be a teacher. And, you know, my mom is not, she's kind of blunt. She says, there weren't a lot of people hiring little black girls to be secretaries, and I wasn't going to spend my life in another woman's kitchen. So, she decided to become a teacher. And it occurred to me then that students of my age and before had benefited, strangely and sadly enough, from a societal misogyny. That our classrooms were overflowing with these brilliant, mostly women, who in a future time would have had a million options to do a million things. But back then they had few options. if you were my mother's age and grew up in her part of the country, and you look like her, and you were really talented at math or science, you would have had few options to become a mathematician or an engineer. But you were expected, almost, to have the option to become a math teacher or a science teacher. So we had all of this amazing talents kind of forced into the classrooms. Now that we have more equality and there are more options for everyone, we have to now decide as a society to make a conscious effort to attract the best minds into the teaching profession, because they now have options. We have to compete to attract and retain the best candidates for the classroom. A 2010 McKinsey & Company report entitled Closing the Talent Gap, Attracting and Retaining Top Third Graduates to Careers in Teaching found that top performing nations like Singapore, Finland, South Korea recruit all of their teachers from the top third of graduates and then screen for additional important qualities. By contrast, in the United States, only 23% of new teachers come from the top third, and just 17% in high poverty schools, which is where they're probably most needed, which is a huge gap. According to the report, the starting salary in 2010 averaged $39,000 a year. Now let's just assume, and you all know this better than me, let's just assume a third of that's going to federal, state, local taxes, so now you're down to like taking home maybe $26,000 a year, right? But the Project on Student Debt by the Institute for College Access and Success estimates that a senior graduating that year carried an average debt of $25,000. The math doesn't add up. Furthermore, jobs and education were slashed substantially from August of 2008 until August of 2011. According to a White House report, nearly 300,000 educators lost jobs during that period. That represented more than half of all losses in local government. Add to that the results of a 2001 report by McGraw-Hill Research Foundation and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development that found that one of the differences between the United States and countries with high-performing school systems was, to quote, "The teaching profession in the United States does not have the same high status as it once did, nor does it compare with the status teachers enjoy in the world's best performing economies." The report highlighted two examples of this diminished status. According to a 2005 NEA report, you can pat yourselves on the back, nearly 50% of new teachers leave the profession within the first 5 years of teaching. They cite poor working conditions and low pay as the chief reasons. You can't have these experienced teachers if you're having such turnover on the front end. If you're having that many teachers leaving in the first 5 years, how will you ever get to the point where you can share knowledge and wisdom about how to deal with these children who are struggling? That requires experience unto itself. The second thing was that high school teachers in the United States work longer hours than those teachers in other countries, an average of 50 hours a week. And yet the US devotes a far smaller proportion of its money than other rich countries to salaries, to teacher salaries. I saw this in my own mother. I could see up close her trying to break through to kids and how heartbreaking that was. She cared about students, and they cared about her to the point that they would call her mama, which I hated. I was like, that's not your mom, you need to calm down. But she was that close to them. I can remember people doing homework at our house, at our table. But that's what she thought it required. She wasn't just teaching a school lesson, she was teaching life lessons. For her, it wasn't just about facts and figures. It was about the love of learning and the love of self. It was about education in its grandest frame. What sticks with you when everything else falls away. Albert Einstein once said, education is what remains after one has forgotten what one learned in school. That is what she was trying to teach. Teach you to love the process of learning. Teach you to love to read on your own. She showed me what great teachers look like. Proud, exhausted, underpaid, and overworked. For great teachers, the job is less about a career than a calling. You don't become a teacher because you want to make a world of money. You become a teacher because you want to make a world of difference. But hard work deserves a fair wage. There's only so much a person can do with passion alone. The bills come. It is no wonder then that April Gallup report found that, as U.S. News and World Report put it, on 2 points, teachers were the least likely of any profession surveyed on workforce engagement to respond positively, whether they feel their opinions at work count and whether their supervisors created an open and trusting environment. Teachers are being managed to death. It's all about expectations, not as much about experience. Not about what the teachers know work, but what people who have never taught a day in their life are telling them they should do at work. We can't expect to attract the best students into that sort of environment to become teachers, even if they are gifted and would make great teachers. That's why I have a hard time tolerating when people disproportionately blame teachers for poor educational outcomes. I understand that not every teacher is going to be a great one. Neither is every plumber, neither is every electrician, neither is every columnist. Every profession has space for high performers and people who are not necessarily the highest performers. If you look at it that way, why then do teachers become so demonized for simply having an array of talents? That leads to a big part of the problem. Teachers have been so maligned in the national debate that it's hard to attract the best and brightest to see it as a viable and rewarding career choice, even if they have high aptitudes and a natural gift. And finally, we need to remember that children are people too, and we should make school a place that they want to go, not just a place that they have to go. That is a huge change from what I remember about school. And these are like little things in a way. They should be common sense, but we're moving in exactly the opposite directions. Start with one thing: have good food. This may seem like a small thing, but for a child, it is huge. When I was a child, we loved the cafeteria. There were real cooks. My grandmother was one of these cooks. They made real food. Much of it was locally sourced. They were proud of what they did, and we were happy to eat it. Now that has completely changed. A report last year from the Pew Charitable Trust found that only 1 in 10 school districts nationwide has all the kitchen equipment needed to serve healthy food. Some schools don't even have kitchens at all. They have these warming ovens, or they have microwaves, and some of them have invited the fast food companies to come in and sell directly to the kids in the schools. This is not the way to promote healthy eating habits, healthy children, healthy learning. Now, that's not to say that we didn't have dessert. We had dessert pretty much every day. There was a concession machine outside, and you can get a little candy. But this leads to another thing. We had recess in PE. We could work it off. We're cutting recess. Now, only about a half of American students have a full hour of PE every day. And when those kids get up to high school, that number drops to a third. We're feeding them garbage, and we don't let them get a chance to work it off. That shows up in their health and ability to focus in a classroom. Lastly, we need to rethink the slashing of arts programs in schools, particularly music, and restore as much as possible. I know the arts seem like, soft skills in an environment where there's an obscenely enormous testing apparatus that is consuming curriculums and functions as in my mind, a perverse operation that gets between students and teachers. It can seem like it's frivolous. It can seem like it's eating up precious resources of time and money. But science tells us that the arts are anything but frivolous when it comes to learning. Joanne Lipton argued just last week in the Wall Street Journal that music training has been shown to boost children's academic performance and help fix some of our schools' most intractable problems. As Lipton laid out, music training enhances children's executive function, that is, their brain's ability to plan, organize, strategize, solve problems. And it was shown to reduce the academic gap between rich and poor districts. And also, it's just fun. But all of these things that we now see as kind of peripheral things, feed the kids, let them go out and play and give them exercise, give them access to music. The things that made school part of what school was when I was a kid, we are now chipping away at in favor of more testing. We're killing our kids. We're stunting them and testing them as they become stunted. In short, and finally, let me wrap all this up in a couple of paragraphs. We have to better value and better pay our teachers. We have to free them up from the testing constraints to be more fluid and productive in the structures that they set up in their particular classrooms. We have to address the issues that children bring to school with them before they even make it to school. Poverty, stress, hunger. You can't focus on anything if you're hungry. And we have to remember to make school a fun and fulfilling place with all the wraparound services that children need and the broad, immersive experience of being a full human being. People say that our schools are broken. I say our society and our system is broken. Schools and teachers and students just exist in that context. When we fix the larger structure, we will go a long way towards fixing our educational structures. Thank you very much.
So we had a little note, and I don't know if my team can accommodate, but Charles will take, we have a little bit of time for questions. So he's open. Anybody with a question?
Thank you so much for being here. I was particularly struck by the story that you told about fourth grade and your teacher and the math test. And we listened to some students this morning before you were here. And I'm interested in knowing if there are other transformational moments where a teacher saw you in a way, like for the first time, that you knew that changed your identity and who you were going to be.
Well, I think that there were more teachers that basically amplified what Ms. Thomas had done. The experience of them always saying, you can do anything, and literally letting us do anything. I remember once we were in high school and we were learning about the writing of the US Constitution, and we said, you know what, we can write this as a play. They said, of course you could. And then we wrote it as a play, we performed it as a play, a bunch of boys, you know, how hard is it to get a bunch of boys to sit down and write a play? We wrote it as a play, we performed it as a play, we took these, we didn't have any money, right? So we wore jeans and stuffed them into our socks to make it look like we had those old pants. And we just flipped our collars up on our shirts and pinned them so it could look like those high collars, the best we could represent what they were doing. And the teacher said that she had called and that the Smithsonian they wanted to send a picture that we took, and they were going to keep it. This idea that nothing was beyond for us, that they never told us no. Every time we said, we should do whatever. We want to raise money for these, you know, some charity we would raise money. We said, we want to raise money, we want to have a carnival. They said, of course you do. And we went out and we had a carnival. It was the most pathetic carnival you ever seen in your life. But it was a carnival and people came. But everything we wanted to do, they just let us, we want to start a newspaper. We was a tiny school. We didn't have a newspaper. They said, of course you do. Start a newspaper. It was just a couple of pieces of paper, you know, printed on both sides and a staple in the corner, but we started a newspaper. But this idea that they were encouraging us to be adventurous, to think outside of the box, to have immersive learning experiences, not just what we're going to do here in this classroom. What can you do with it? What do you want to do with it? And pushing you all the way through. When I say, I came from a school, the entire K through 12 now is about 1,200 people. For someone from that school to win their way to the International Science Fair is huge. But it was because I had a science teacher that said, what's your idea for a project? That's great, let's see how we can make this happen. and working with you all. Never once were they saying what I was hearing at the other school, which was, you know, something's not right here. You need to be in a remedial class. You need to get out of my way so I can teach the rest of this. No, focus on me. I believe in you. You can do this. So it was just an amplifier, and that's why I say it was the entire school system. They were older. They had been around. They believed in you. They wanted you to succeed. Part of that also was, you know, I must say that the school, that tiny school, had started its life about 100 years before. It's still on the same piece of earth. It had started as the first black college in North Louisiana. It was called Coleman College. And it was set up to educate the sons and daughters of former slaves. So you were completely surrounded with a history that connected you to something that was bigger than you. So there were all these erudite people in pictures and, you know, beautiful old suits from the turn of the century who looked just like you. And it was just amazing. So you never thought you couldn't do something because it had been done 100 years ago. They erected this school from nothing. And it was beautiful. And it wasn't like they were just teaching how to farm. They were teaching Latin and botany. I mean, they would make sure that we understood what was happening where we took classes. That was transformational for me because I could see my life in the grand sweep of history. And I could see that I'm walking on the same little pathway that these people must have walked on. So it was huge. It was huge. And the teachers had that sense that there was something special about this place, and there was something special about you, and there was something special about them, and you just absorbed all that.
Was the demonizing of teachers and the profession, and that, of course, people don't want to go into a profession that isn't attractive or highly thought of. But we've had a great PR campaign run against us for a number of years. And if you can demonize the profession and you can take out the unions that advocate for the profession, then we are wide open to privatization. I think we need some help. I know we need some help telling our story, the good stories that come out of public education. That is the one great thing this country has going for it and has had going for it for a long time. How can, that said, I don't see as many great stories coming out about public education as I do about the failure of public education. So how can you and your colleagues start helping us a little bit more with some of those great stories and pushing back on those that say public education is failing? We're not failing. We are doing better today than we have ever done in our past. Those great ideas in the 50s were not so great for a lot of people.
Right.
We're doing a lot better today, and we'll continue to do better. We need help telling our story.
Yeah, I mean, you started by saying it the right way. It is a PR campaign, right? And I don't know if I can answer the PR question in terms of the telling of stories. I have seen, however, people making really convincing arguments, both books, television, everywhere, about the impact that poverty and stress for students is having on educational outcomes. That if you take out the poor kids, the ones that are really in stress, the numbers look a lot different than they do with those kids in it. The thing is, I think we have to just talk about the bigger societal issues, which is what I was trying to get at. The society is failing. If you have that many poor kids, you have that many kids who are hungry, you have that many kids who are teetering on or falling into homelessness, which is another disaster and shame on us as a nation. Until we address that, it's kind of unfair to me to come to the teachers and say, well, you didn't fix poverty in America. That's not the teacher's job to fix poverty. And, you know, I saw my own mom towards the end, not towards the beginning. In the beginning, she seemed to have like a lot of supplies, and we would go early the week before school started, we'd make bulletin boards and all sorts of. Towards the end, she's buying pencils. We didn't have money. Like, how is it that we have to buy supplies for the classroom? So this idea that we're shifting more and more of the kind of social structural burden of a society onto teachers to say, we're not going to deal with this issue, but you have to, is not fair. And I think the teachers have to keep telling that story.
You, because I just, that was amazing. You said something that really captured that it's going to resonate with me for a while. You said that we are killing kids by over-testing, and I think everyone in this room agrees with you wholeheartedly, but what can we do together? What movement can we start to let federal, state levels know that we're killing our kids and we need to focus on social skills and arts and all these other things that enrich our kids? What can we do? I mean, we all have a voice, we all have an opportunity, but we need a movement. So what is your vision, or what can we do to really make that known that we are killing our kids with over-testing?
You know, I think some of these questions are kind of bigger than me. I mean, what I have is language and a space in which to express that language. So whenever I get a chance, or whenever the topic comes back up, I try to write about it in that broad context to say, these are the valuable things that we're kind of getting rid of in order to test more. And that is the vicious cycle. Because you've gotten rid of these extra things, the test scores are going to go down. And then you slice them more because you say, well, we need to test some more, which means that they're going to go down some more. At a certain point, you have to break out of that thinking and say, these are human beings. These are not chipmunks. And, you know, they have to have the things that human beings need to survive and to thrive, to make the connections in the brain. I can do that on paper. I don't know how the advocates do that. I don't know how the foot soldiers do that. And I don't think I'm, you know, the right person to answer that part of the equation. I can only write. Oh, I hope so. Thank you. Thank you.